In this video, we are going to discuss what Sohcahtoa is and how we are going to use trig ratios to find angles and sides of a right triangle. Now, the purpose of trig functions is when we do not have enough information to be able to solve for a side of a triangle. For example, in Pythagorean theorem, we have a squared plus b squared equals c squared. But in order to solve for one of those sides, that means we have to have at least two sides known. And what's wrong with this triangle is the fact that we only know one of the sides. We do not know two of the other sides, which means we cannot solve that triangle. Enter trig functions. As long as we know a side and an angle, we actually will be able to find the other sides. And here is the intro of what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. So according to the angle, we're going to create what the sides are represented. So according to this angle, this is our opposite because it's literally on the opposite side. This is our adjacent because it is the side that is next to the angle. And this is our hypotenuse because it is always across from the right angle. Our hypotenuse is always the longest side. In this case, because our angle's up here, it is now going to change what our sides are represented. So according to this angle, this is now our opposite side because it's opposite the triangle. This is our adjacent because it is touching it, next to it. And then this is our hypotenuse. Again, the hypotenuse never changes because it is always opposite of the right angle. And again, it's also because it is the longest side. So the adjacent and opposite might be in different places, but the hypotenuse never changes. Enter Sohcahtoa. So this is actually an acronym. The So represents the sign of a function, and that is represented by a ratio of opposite over the hypotenuse. O representing the hypotenuse, and O representing opposite, and H representing hypotenuse. That's why the O and then the H go next to each other. The C stands for cosine, and it is represented by the A in adjacent divided by the H in hypotenuse, which is why it goes to A and then an H. And then last, T stands for tangent, and it is represented by O for opposite divided by A for adjacent. They are represented by a ratio of numbers. So memorizing this acronym will help you to be able to solve for the different information that we need. So for example, according to this angle, the first thing I'm going to do is write what my sides are. This is automatically my hypotenuse because it is opposite of the right angle. This is my opposite because it's literally on the opposite side of this angle. And this is my adjacent because it is the side that is next to the angle. It's actually touching the angle. So the sign is the opposite over hypotenuse. Well, the opposite is 3 and the hypotenuse is 5. So the sign of this angle is the ratio of 3 over 5. Cosine of this angle is my adjacent, which in this case is 4, divided by my hypotenuse, which is 5. And tangent is my opposite side, which is 3, divided by my adjacent, which is 4. Now understand that these are just ratios right now. We have not actually found the angle. We know that the sine of the angle is going to be this ratio. So you attempt this one, pause the video, and then resume to see the answer. According to this angle, I'm going to go ahead and first write my sides. I always do this first. This is my hypotenuse. That was my opposite. And this is my adjacent. So sine is opposite over hypotenuse. My cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. And my tangent is opposite over adjacent. Again, at this moment, we are only discussing what the trig ratio stands for. Now we're going to start figuring out what these actually mean. So to actually put this in the calculator, you're literally going to do exactly what it says. So for example, on this first one, cosine of 50, you're literally going to type cosine of 50 degrees and hit enter, and it will give you your answer. Now don't forget, there is a chance that your calculator could be in radian mode. So what you need to do is you need to click the mode button, and you need to go down and you need to make sure that the degree is selected. And then you can go back and click cosine of 50. That will give you your answer. The next will be sine of 43. That will give you your answer. And then tangent of 80, which will give you that answer. The cosine of 50, we had gotten 0.643. Cosine of 43, we got 0.682. And tangent, we got 5.671. Now, same thing on the other side. If we were to do cosine of 100, we actually would get a negative 0.174. And I'm going to explain in later lessons why you actually can get a negative. Next, sine of 90 is actually the number 1, and tangent of 45 degrees is also the number 1. So now we're going to put this into practice to be able to actually find a side. So let's start with the top one. I'm going to highlight my angle, and now I'm going to write what sides I have known. I have the adjacent, which I actually don't know, but that is the variable I'm looking for. And I have the hypotenuse. Why is the hypotenuse? Because it's the longest side. The adjacent is the side that's touching it. And so I'm looking for the trig ratio that deals with an A and an H. So if we write Sohcahtoa, as long as you spell it correctly, we are looking for A and H next to each other, which means we're looking for cosine. So cosine of our angle is going to be my adjacent over my hypotenuse, and we now have an equation that we can actually solve for. So to solve for this, to solve for the x, I'm going to multiply both sides by 23. So I will get 23 times cosine of 70 equals x. And if you type that into the calculator, you will get 7.866 equals x, depending on where you round. The next, for this angle right here, I am dealing with the opposite side, and I'm dealing with the hypotenuse. Why? Because it's across the right angle. So now I am looking for an O and an H. O and H deals with sine. So sine of my angle equals my opposite, which is x, over my hypotenuse, which is 10. So to solve, I'm going to multiply both sides by 10 in order to get x by itself. So in the calculator, I'm going to multiply 10 times sine of 42. And I will get 6.69 equals x. Now for these two, if you would like to pause the video and try these on your own, and then click resume to check the answer. Okay, according to my angle, this is my adjacent, and this is my hypotenuse. So A and H, again, if I write Sohcahtoa, A and H deal with cosine. So cosine of my angle equals my adjacent over my hypotenuse. Now, the way to solve for this, because x is in your denominator, one way you can do is to make everything a fraction and then cross multiply. So x times cosine of 70 equals 1 times 4. So to solve for x, I'm going to divide both sides by cosine of 70. And so x is going to give me 4 divided by cosine of 70, which is 11.7. According to this angle, this is my opposite side, and this is my adjacent. So O and A is going to be my tangent. So tangent of my angle is my opposite divided by my adjacent. So to solve for x, I'm going to multiply both sides by 17. And I'll get 17 times tangent of 65. And that will give me 36.46, again, depending on where you round. Okay, now in this case, this is where we're going in reverse order. When you're actually trying to find the original angle that you had. So what they're saying is the sine of some angle is giving me 0.5. So in order to find what the angle is, you actually have to find the inverse. So in any time you are trying to find an angle, you will actually do the inverse of that number. And how you put that in the calculator is you're going to click second sine, and that actually is the inverse of sine of 0.5, and it will give you your answer of 30 degrees. That means that our original angle was 30 degrees, because just to check and make sure that actually worked, if you actually did sine of 30, you actually get 0.5, so it does work. So the same thing with cosine. If we do second cosine of 0.872, we will get 29.3. And again, tangent. If we do second tangent of 0.45, we will get 24.2. So in this case, we will get 29.3 degrees. Do not forget the degrees. And here we'll get 24.2 degrees. Again, if you're trying to find an angle, you will do the inverse of your number, and that will tell you your angle. Same thing with this one. take the inverse to find your angle. Now on this side, if you were to attempt these, something would happen. If I do the second cosine of 1.34, you actually would get an error. Same thing with sine. If you do the second sine of 1.83, you would also get an error. And here's what's happening. For cosine and sine, you cannot have anything greater than 1. So to find cosine of this angle, this ratio right here has to be less than 1 in order for you to find an angle. And the reason is, if you were to have a ratio, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So to have a ratio of a number that's bigger than 1, that means the adjacent side had to be bigger than the hypotenuse, and that is not possible. Your hypotenuse will always be the longest side of a triangle. And so that is why if you have a number that is bigger than 1, that means the ratio number on top was bigger than the ratio on bottom, which means that's not a possible triangle to have. So if you have greater than 1, it is not going to be possible. Same thing with sine. However, tangent, it does not matter, because tangent was opposite over adjacent. It doesn't matter if one side is particularly bigger than the other side. We're only worried about hypotenuse. But for a tangent, you can actually find the second tangent of a number, and you would get 59.1 degrees. So to actually put this into practice, so according to this angle, this is my opposite side, and this is my hypotenuse. So according to Sohcahtoa, O and H stand for sine. So sine of my angle is going to be my opposite over my hypotenuse. Because we are looking for the angle, because we're having to go in reverse order to find the angle, you are going to do the inverse sine of the number 3/5. So literally in the calculator, you are going to do the inverse sine of 3 divided by 5. And you get 36.9. And don't forget that this is a degree. Make sure you actually put a degree when you're looking for an angle. Same thing on this one. If we are looking for an angle, this is our adjacent, because it's the side touching it. This is our hypotenuse, because it's the longest side and it's across the right angle. A and H stand for cosine, because that is where the A and H are. So cosine of my angle, well, I guess in this case it's X, equals my adjacent over my hypotenuse. And because we're looking for the angle, we will do the inverse. So in the calculator, you're going to type second cosine of 5 over 13, and you'll get 67.4 degrees. Again, do not forget to put the degree symbol. So you try these two and then resume the video whenever you want to check your answers. So in this case, we're going to be using tangent, because O and A, opposite over adjacent. So because we're looking for an angle, we are going to do the inverse. So second tangent of 4 divided by 10 will give you 21.8 degrees. Is on this one. According to this angle, this is my opposite, and this is my hypotenuse. O and H stand for sine. So sine of my angle is my opposite over my hypotenuse. Because I'm looking for an angle, I'm going to do the inverse, and I will get 60.41 degrees. So to recap, first, when we think of Sohcahtoa, we are looking for a trig ratio. So for this first one, if I am according to this angle, this becomes my opposite side, this becomes my adjacent, and this becomes my hypotenuse. So the sine of this angle is going to be my opposite over my hypotenuse. Cosine of this angle is my adjacent over my hypotenuse. Now in this case, because we're looking for a tangent of A, we have to rewrite part of these sides, because according to this angle, this now becomes my opposite and this becomes my adjacent. So for angle A, my opposite is now 20 and my adjacent is 21. Again, to recap, just to be able to type these into the calculator, go ahead and work on these, pause the video, and then resume to check your answers. So cosine of 52 is going to be 0.62 because it says round to the nearest hundredth, so you want 2 decimal places. Tangent is going to be 0.47, and sine is going to be 0.98. Now on the right-hand side, we're looking for angles, which means we will have to do the inverse of these answers. And we will get 14.18 degrees. Do not forget, because I'm looking for an angle, it's a degree. This next one will give me 55.46 degrees. And second tangent will be 56.31 degrees. And last, let's practice some. So go ahead and pause the video, check these answers, and then hit resume to see the answers. According to this angle, this is my opposite, this is my hypotenuse, and again, if you think of Sohcahtoa, you have the sine of your angle equals the opposite over hypotenuse. So to solve, I'm going to multiply both sides by 17 because I'm solving for x. And I will get 14.6 because it says round to the nearest tenth. According to this angle, this is my opposite, this is my hypotenuse because it's across the right angle. O and H is also sine. So sine of an angle is going to give me my opposite over my hypotenuse. So to solve for the angle, I'm going to do the inverse of my ratio. And I will get 62.4 degrees. Don't forget the degree on an angle. On this next one, according to this angle, this is my adjacent, and this is my hypotenuse. A and H stand for cosine. So cosine of my angle is my adjacent over hypotenuse. So to solve, I'm going to multiply both sides. And I will get 17.8. On this angle, this is my adjacent, and this is my opposite. So A and O, we are going to use tangent. So tangent is going to be equal to my opposite divided by my adjacent. And anytime you have x in the x in the denominator, if you make it a fraction, you can cross multiply. So you'll get x times tan of 40 equals 1 times 20. So to solve, you will divide by tan of 40, and you will get 23.8. And last, according to this angle, this is my adjacent, this is my hypotenuse, which means cosine of my angle is my adjacent over my hypotenuse. So I'm going to do the inverse of my ratio, and I will get 48.2 degrees.